There have been critical moments in history of humanity where people have risen up to demand their human and civil rights. Once again, we are at such a moment. Mass protests in Iran joined Gandhi's India, Martin Luther King's United States, and Mandela's South Africa. We are bearing witness to global outrage and solidarity. The world is united with the people of Iran today. July 25th, the Global Day of Action for Iran, we stand together today, united for Iran. We are a non-partisan collaborative of individuals and human rights organizations. United for Iran does not promote any political agenda. Our only aim is to condemn the widespread and systematic violations of the Iranian people's human and civil rights. We promote nonviolent, peaceful citizen activism and protests. We oppose military strike or war on Iran. We oppose blanket sanctions. We rally together today to show our solidarity for the people of Iran. We would like to acknowledge that each one of us has the right to free speech and expression. However, it is important that we all keep in mind the true cause of our gathering today, and that cause is not one for us or our personal interest, but rather the interest and well-being of our sisters and brothers in Iran.
Islamic Republic of Iran!
We must come together today peacefully to show our unity and to show the world that we are united for Iran. Beyond July 25th, we have 4 requests. Violence against and persecution of dissidents in Iran shall stop immediately. All prisoners of recent events shall be released immediately. We support democracy and human rights for Iranian people. We condemn any military aggression by US and or Israel against Iran. The United Nations must immediately investigate the grave and systematic human rights violations in Iran to stop the violence, the imprisonment, torture, disappearances, and killings. Iran must not become another Zimbabwe. We call upon all human rights activists around the world to tell their governments that human rights for Iranian people must be a major part of their foreign policy and economic exchanges with Iran. Today's unprecedented global solidarity for the people of Iran is only the beginning of a broad-based worldwide movement in support of human and civil rights in Iran. The struggles may be hard and long, but collectively we shall overcome.
Global outreach and solidarity.
We are a grassroots collective of people, organizations, and leaders who peacefully stand for human and civil rights and denounce tortures, disappearances, and killings.
We are 105 cities in solidarity around the world.
We are heartbroken mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, and friends waiting behind Evin prison doors.
We are 20-year-old bloggers from Istanbul, Seoul, and Prague.
We are Shireen Ebadi, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Jody Williams, President Kim Dae-jung, Wangari Maathai, and Nobel Peace Laureates.
We are Berlin, Paris, Barcelona, and London. We are Manila, New Delhi, Calgary, and Bogota.
We are Esfahan, Shiraz, and Tehran.
We are Portland, Eugene, and Corvallis.
We are Neda and Sohrab.
We are 42 human rights organizations and advocates from the Arab regions.
We are Dolores Huerta, Adolfo Perez Esquivel, and Rigoberta Menchutum.
We are Esmail Khobi, Mahmal Baf, and Simina Behbahani.
We are Qs, Hypernova, and Daryush.
We are dedicated and nameless volunteers afraid for our families' lives.
We are Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Skype users.
We are students, doctors, workers, and teachers.
We are women, men, sons, and daughters.
We are the power of new media, citizen journalism, reporting, and social networking.
We are Amnesty International, Reporters Without Borders, and FIDH.
We are a global movement that has tapped into the anguish and the strength of the world.
We are every person participating today in support of our brothers and sisters in Iran.
We are the protectors of human and civil rights. We are united for humanity.
We are united for Iran.
We are Portland stands with Iran.
Our Iranian sisters and brothers are not alone. We will not forget or look away. We have heard your voices and we are with you.
Over the years, we have been partner of a coalition of peace lovers in Portland, Oregon. As an Iranian, we are also receiving message of support from these organizations who are representing here. I'm going to begin with Reverend Kate Laurie from the First Unitarian Church of Portland.
I, like you, am here today to voice my solidarity with the Iranian people at this very important moment in their history. The Iranian people have clearly expressed their desires for a free democracy, first in an election, and then in a non-violent uprising. In response, the Iranian leadership has met them with violence, intimidation, and imprisonment. We deplore the violence, the crackdown on peaceful protesters, the restrictions on civil liberties, and the imprisonment of civil leaders. If one country wants to support democracy in another country that is under dictatorial rule, the only thing to do is support the freedom fighters who stand for the democratic institutions of that country.
And I was reminded by Godard's the importance of a word, and the word is solidarity. And the word that is, as it is defined by us in Spanish, is hacer causa común, to make it as a common struggle. I was also reminded that when I went to school at the University of Washington in the late 70s, there were a number of Iranian students who, like many of us, that were involved in political movements, also sought the aspirations of liberation of our peoples in our homelands. We supported movements of liberation in many parts of the world, and they did their part in Iran. But the reality is that many of those aspirations has always ended and have been met with repression. What we're witnessing today in Iran is not much difference than what we have witnessed around the world when people are seeking change, when people are seeking liberation, when people are hoping that their rights be respected. That's why it is important today to stand in solidarity with the people of Iran. And it is also, I want to share, given this interaction today, that I worked for a number of years in supporting in solidarity with the people of El Salvador. And the people of El Salvador were involved in a revolutionary movement. A revolutionary movement that had many tendencies, that had many organizations, but that understood the importance of standing in a united front to be able to make sure that when we speak to people in this country, our divisions, our differences did not stand in the way of supporting people's struggles in El Salvador. Because it is important that people understand that yes, it is a process, and it is a process that's going to be resolved in Iran, but it is important to stand with people and make sure that their rights are respected, make sure that their lives are respected, make sure that their freedoms are respected. I would encourage you to do the same and hopefully learn from our process. It was a painful process and it cost us thousands of lives. But the people of El Salvador have prevailed. Let's hope for the people of Iran and prevail in this also. Thank you.
There is this myth that either Palestinian or Latin Americans are supporting Ahmadinejad and the Islamic Republic the way today is. The next speaker is Hala Gores. She's a Palestinian activist in Portland, Palestinian American, and she will be speaking to us from the perspective of an Arab Palestinian.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I stand here before you as a Palestinian Palestinian in solidarity with the people of Iran. Tawfiq Zayed is a Palestinian poet and writer from my hometown of Nazareth. And he wrote a poem that is very well known called Unadikum. He said, Unadikum, ashuddu ala ayadikum, wa abusu al-arda tahta nu'alikum, wa aqulu afdikum. As you all know, translating Arabic or Farsi is very difficult, and the words cannot be translated sometimes. But a rough translation is, I call for you, I squeeze your hands, and I kiss the ground under your heels, and I say, I sacrifice myself for you. Tawfiq Zayed expressed the yearnings of the 1948 Palestinians for their fellow Palestinians in exile. By the same token, our brothers and sisters in Iran call upon us. They call upon us to support them in their mass struggle for the fight for free speech. They are fighting for free speech. They're fighting for the right to assembly. They're fighting for the right to a fair and transparent election. They cry out for us to support them in their mass struggle for democratic rights, for democratic human rights. These fundamental human rights are the same whether they are in Iran or in Palestine. As a Palestinian, I pay tribute to our Iranian brothers and sisters who are at great risk, have courageously protested in the streets for the right to express their opposition to the fraudulent election results. As a Palestinian, I pay tribute to all those who believe in the sanctity of the ballot box. I pay tribute to our Iranian brothers and sisters who are fighting intimidation and censorship. I pay tribute to our Iranian brothers and sisters who have been imprisoned, detained, or died for the sake of justice and freedom. Down with all despotic and ruthless dictators. Down with all despotic and ruthless dictators. Aga Sultan did not die in vain. Long live the Green Movement! Long live the Green Movement!
Thank you.
Long live the Green Movement!
An irony that I just mentioned, that there is this myth that Arabs and Palestinians are supporting the Ahmadinejad presidency. Yesterday, we had 2 demonstrations in solidarity with Iranian people, one in Beirut and one in Caracas, Venezuela. Mayor of Portland.
United!
We are united.
We are 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 united!
The mayor of Portland, Mayor Sam Adams, has proclaimed today as the day of solidarity with Iranian people. And Bahare is going to read the proclamation, a statement by Mayor Sam Adams.
Thank you. Whereas the Iranian Americans living in the Portland metro area are a vibrant part of the city and work in many key positions in the field of art, business, education, medicine, science, and industry. Whereas the Iranian American community has brought a broad selection of cultural and artistic events, including an annual festival, into the cultural mosaic of the City of Roses. And whereas on June 12, 2009, people in Iran participated in a presidential election, but most observers and experts on Iran are of the opinion that the results announced by the government did not reflect the will of the people. And massive non-violent demonstrations in the streets of Tehran demanded the reversal of the results of the elections and asked for democratic changes to the systems of government. Whereas, instead of listening to the peaceful demands of millions of demonstrators, the Iranian authorities decided to use brutal force in order to silence the dissents as the world watched through the eyes of eye reporters. And whereas armed militia and plainclothes policemen cracked down on protesters, killing at least 19, according to the state-owned IRI broadcasting, arresting more than 1,500 people and persecuting them for taking part in the peaceful demonstrations. And whereas Iranian Americans living in the Oregon and Southwest Washington area have relatives and friends who have directly suffered by these events. They have come together in several vigils and demonstrations in Portland to show their support for the People's Green Movement for democracy in Iran. And whereas the city of Portland on several occasions in the past has shown support for the Iranian people by condemning the hostile policies of the U.S. administration and the threat of war in Iran, and in support of friendship between the two nations. Now, therefore, Sam Adams, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, does hereby proclaim Saturday, July 25th, 2009, to be a day of solidarity with the people of Iran in Portland, and encourage all residents to observe this day. Thank you, Sam Adams.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Mayor Adams. Thank you, Portland.
U.S. funding of repressive and insurgent organizations supports the repressive and suspicious conservative government of Iran today, who wish to maintain control in spite of the people's power and movement. But we should be telling our government not to do those sorts of things. Instead, we are here today in solidarity with the people of Iran. And the people of Iran welcomed me and the other members of our peaceful delegation with open arms. We visited with veterans groups, we visited with people on the street, and they hugged us. And they said we need to get rid of the leaders of both of our countries and put people in power with justice and social democracy so that we can live our lives according to the law and rule of the land. So we are here as support for the people of Iran today. The people power is the answer. Many successful movements since World War II are really because the people have taken the power. Here in this country, we need to take power to develop healthcare reform. We need to take power to support our schools, to get rid of corporate influence in our government, and supporting the other people movements around the world. Thank you.
Now, it is my great pleasure to announce that we are going to have Mayor Sam Adams, Mayor of Portland, Oregon. As I announced before and we read the proclamation, Mayor is a supporter of Iranian community and we thank him very much.
I apologize for being late. I was at a funeral for a friend, but I wanted to be here, even if it is late, to let you know how inspiring your event today, your protest, your plea for basic freedom and democracy in Iran is, what a universal desire it is, not only for the people of Iran, for the people of Portland, and every place in the world. And my comments today are going to be very short, but I hope you know that they are very heartfelt. As your mayor, I can say with great sincerity and enthusiasm, absolutely, the people of Portland stand with the people of Iran. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Tom Hastings, a professor of conflict resolution and peace at Portland State University. As you know, Portland State is one of our allies in everything, any cultural events, any forum, any teaching we have had in this town has happened at Portland State for more than 30 years. They have been supporting the Iranian community, and we thank Tom Hastings for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Gudars. The one little piece that I write about is the history of nonviolence, the history of people power, the history of civil society rising up. And my one little tiny piece with Iran is I was the first one to write about the original revolution, the 1978-79 revolution, belonging in that category. And the Iranian people are inventing their own version of whatever they want. It's really time to understand that from the West, from the global North, it is not our business to tell them how to do what they do, to tell them what result that they should come up with. But to look at the tradition Dr. Thomason referred to of people power around the world, beginning in the global South, beginning in Africa and Asia, and finally, nearly 75 years after this process was invented, beginning in 1906 in South Africa, finally, Eastern Europeans and Central Europeans learned those lessons and did a velvet revolution. In between, those processes were all invented by peoples of color. So this is a tradition that many people mistake. Many people say, well, nonviolence is just a Euro tradition, just a Western tradition. It has something to do with a certain religion. That's not true at all. That's not true at all if we look at the history. One of the key things that Iranians and others have taught the world is how to do whatever they want to do from the bottom up with the fewest possible casualties. You heard early on the name of each person that was known to have been killed in this. And it's a terrible loss. Each and every person is a terrible loss. Had they picked up the gun, the losses would be astronomical. We would be reading off names by the thousands. The Iranian people are choosing the wisest path down a very tricky course right now. They are learning to do it by themselves. They are teaching the world lessons. And I can tell you that we'll study this for a long, long time and hope to learn what the Iranian people are learning and are teaching now in the future. I think that another one of the instructive models that has gone back and forth with Iran has been the Philippines. It's very interesting there that when Filipinas and Filipinos rose up against the United States-backed Marcos, who had been in power for more than 25 years, backed militarily and was basically nothing but a strongman, that the people rose up, they trained themselves for about 10 years, very quietly, and they got ready. And when Marcos tried to steal the election, they took it back. And they intervened between two armies of tanks that were getting ready for civil war. That was after the Iranian 1978-79 revolution. The Filipinos and Filipinas did that in February of 1986. And here's the lesson for those who say, well, these people are acting as dupes of the West, is that the Filipinos and Filipinas, like the Iranians, did it twice. If people learn to do this, you can't take that power away. You can't take that knowledge away from the people, from the civil society, on how to do that again when the opportunity and the need arises. So I applaud the Iranian people, certainly stand in solidarity, and I want to make a pledge today, and I think this ought to be, at least I'm hoping it will be something that will unite all peoples who say that they stand for the Iranian people, that stand in solidarity with the Iranian people, and that is this, that if Israel or the United States militarily attacks Iran at any point, then I'm going to make a personal pledge to go down to Senator Wyden's office and sit in that office until he shows some leadership and condemns this, votes against it, or until they take me away. I would invite everybody to make that pledge if they say that they stand.
As they say these days, the Iranian action has become a verb. A high school teacher in New York writes on his blog that in a classroom, after one teacher said something and the students got upset, they said, we're going to go Iranian on you. And that's what we are learning from Iranian people. We are going to go Iranian on them. Our next speaker is my very good friend Mazel Moloch. He is one of the founders of the Palestinian Arab American Association of Portland, a person who has a long history of solidarity and alliance with the Iranian movement. Mazel.
We have, while we're watching all these events unfold in Iran, come very, very dramatic scene to us who come from the Middle East. As all of you in general and the people who come from the Middle East know, the Palestinian people have been struggling for their rights for the last 60-some years or so. And it's not only the problem with the occupation and the oppression from Israel that they're getting. Unfortunately, often enough, the Palestinian cause is taken and somehow hijacked by dictators around the region in order to try to cover their ability to oppress their own people. The very latest notable addition to this group is the Iranian regime, where they come and very openly start talking about Palestine and the Palestinian people, thinking that that justifies the oppression that they are provoking and putting on the Iranian people. We tell all the dictators in the area and all the people who try to use and abuse and misuse the Palestinian cause, the best thing that you could do for the Palestinian cause is work for democracy and freedom and citizen and civil rights in your country. Please, do what you need to do. We can do our own part. Don't do us any favor by saying, oh, I'm here to fix the Palestinian issue. Meanwhile, I'm oppressing my own people. The second thing that we actually have seen over and over again in the struggles of the Middle East, that most of you are probably aware of, and the ones who are not should be. The religious right in the Middle East and in the whole world is somehow works hand in hand. Now think about what the religious right in the United States with the previous administration have wreaked havoc on the whole area, and how the religious right in the Middle East also takes this message and plays with it in the same way. The religious right is a problem that we need to pay attention to in the Middle East and come to somehow get rid of all these people that they think that they speak on the behalf of God and know what is the right and wrong that they impose on everybody else, and come back and say there is no divine right for somebody to come and impose their will on everybody else. The will and the right and the 21st century says we need democracy, we need the representation of people, we need human rights, civil rights, and complete freedom of press, and freedom of religion, and freedom of everybody else. Please, that's what we are. We are with you. You represent part of our struggle. You might or might not succeed. This revolution might or might be, in a way, kidnapped too. Some of our revolution has been kidnapped by the religious right, and you should be careful about not getting kidnapped again. Peace.